Welcome back to The Real P3, where passion, purpose, and progress come together in animal nutrition. We're not just talking pigs anymore. This is the new era of The Real P3, pigs, poultry, and pets. Join your hosts, Chantel, Daniel, and Casey, Animistic's powerhouse team of animal nutrition and health experts, as they dive deep into the science and heart behind animal and pet nutrition and health. From commercial swine systems to backyard chicken flocks, from champion show pigs to your favorite couch-loving golden retriever, we're covering it all. Expect real stories, real science, and real solutions for those who feed, nurture, and innovate across species. Because here at The Real P3, we're faithfully serving through science plus heart. Subscribe now and come thrive with us.
Well, it's really great to have both of you here for the first official P3 podcast recording, being back. So go pigs. I'm really happy to have you here, Philip, or back here. Maybe you could share in a minute a little bit about your previous podcast recording. People can go listen to that one, come back to listen to this one. Really excited to have updates from you. And then Dr. Casey Bradley for joining us as well. She always has great insights. So I'm really happy to have all three of us here, and I'm really looking forward to this chat. So if Philip, you can give a little bit of your background and then speak a little bit about your previous podcast recording. I had to listen to it last week.
And we're talking like the 4 years ago one, Philip.
Yes.
About that. Yeah. So it's nice to be back on here and to see you guys. I can't remember about the 4 year ago, and we've recorded quite a few since then. But if we're going to focus on pig only, I think we had an interesting recording on a boar. And just like a boar's not a boar was really topical, and it still is topical. I actually did a training today with a student coming through about the boars again. So that was really interesting. And then, yeah, aside from that, we've got a couple more farms up and running. So we're up to about 6,000 sows, which has been really interesting. But yeah, other than that, it's the day in the life of a pig farmer. 365 days a year, and not much time out of that.
Can you kind of explain where your swine farm is in the world and the climate and how it's set up, how advanced it is?
So we're in Zimbabwe, which is sort of it's southern Africa. It's just above South Africa. It neighbors South Africa. It's a landlocked country, so relatively sort of warm climate, which you could imagine African climates are. So we've got beautiful weather for most of the year. Our hottest season will go up into sort of the mid to high 30 degrees Celsius. We're in Celsius here. And then, yeah, winter, we're in our winter now, but I'm walking around in just a jacket, some shorts, and a pair of slops, and it's the middle of our winter. So cold, really cold days will get down to like 5 degrees. So really beautiful weather here all year round. Our piggeries are pretty much old piggeries. They're built on fully concrete floors, all open ventilation. We don't have to close our barns up at all because the weather is so great throughout the year. It does get quite hot though, so we are focusing on trying to close up our service lines in our farrowing houses as much as we can and do some sort of forced air ventilation in there just to cool that down to a certain degree. But yeah, generally it's open-sided buildings.
I'm really interested, coming from South Africa. I've been in the States here 3 years now, so I'm probably a little bit spoiled at this point. But coming from South Africa, where we're used to load shedding, water cuts, and all those things, I used to manage a big pig farm in Bainsfield in KwaZulu-Natal, and dealing with electricity or water issues, having generators or enough fuel. How do you get around those things? I've always wanted to ask a Zimbabwean how do they farm in Zimbabwe, is my question.
I'm really glad you asked the question. Perspective is everything. So I think South Africans are really spoiled. You guys don't know what load shedding is and what not operating without electricity. So I always love it when they complain about the 4 hours or the 6 hours of load shedding that they had without electricity. Whereas we'd be going like 18 hours a day without power, which is constant. I remember when we started the really long power cuts, we'd only get electricity at like 10 o'clock at night, and it would go off again at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And that carried on for the first 3 months. And I remember the first 3 months, I was like, this is soul destroying. But you change, everything changes, and you adapt to that. And you stop spending your evenings watching TV, but you start reading more as a family. And candlelight dinners become a thing, and it becomes really beautiful. You look forward to it. So it's always perspective. It is a very costly environment to farm livestock in, especially with automated feeders and infrared lights, because you've got generators running 24 hours a day. But again, the conversion to solar is also there as an option, which we're looking at now. But life without power is very manageable. And I think the world is going that way. Flying into Joburg the other day, you just see solar panels. I remember as a Zimbabwean flying to South Africa, we used to notice all the swimming pools flying over Joburg. And now we notice all the solar panels. So life without being on the grid is very possible. And I think the whole world is actually moving that way now anyway, with biogas, with solar. So any new builds, I would highly recommend, regardless of where you are in the world, to be looking at that as an option. So yeah, farming here with our challenges is interesting, but you adjust and you adapt.
That's such an interesting way of looking at it in a positive light. I've never seen load shedding as a positive light. My struggles on the farm was, if there's no electricity, the generators were not powerful enough to pump the water up the hill. So the pigs at the top of the hill would be without water. So we had to kind of get around that. But I suppose with anything too much of a good thing, you kind of revert back to our caveman ways, and it isn't always a bad thing. I definitely do miss the candlelit dinners and stuff like that. So we definitely are spoiled. And I'm really glad that you're taking it from a positive perspective and becoming adaptable to it. That's really cool to hear and really neat to hear. I've been thinking about it for a long time. How do you guys farm in Zimbabwe?
It's fun. Yeah, you guys come out. Yeah, I know it's very different. I love showing people around and how we do it here. And even with South Africa being our neighbors, how blown away they usually are with it. I mean, our best farm is like sitting on 34 point something piglets weaned per sow per year at the moment. They're on 3,000 kgs sold per sow, which I think globally is a really good level. But it's really built on, it's literally higgledy-piggledy. It's on a really old farm. It's all concrete. It's old gum pole is holding up the roofing. Like you walk there and you're like, holy crap, how do you farm on this? And really, the farming isn't like the fanciest building and all the equipment you've got. Farming is really the people involved, the passion involved, and you can really make do with what you've got.
I think that's really important. I want to really say something for the audience, because when we talk about the U.S. swine industry, we are consolidating, and everybody's looking at shutting off the old farms because they're just not profitable. And a paid-off barn, it should be profitable, right? Because it's paid off and you're not having debt with that new facility. But you're showing the world that I can get 34 pigs per sow per year without having consistent electric. I think that's something to say, that it's all perspective. And like you said, the people that you put back in, and it's where you want to spend your capital, in my mind, on good people or very expensive facilities. And obviously, I think that's the disadvantage of the U.S. industry. We think we need really expensive facilities, and we don't invest on good labor.
And that's exactly it. And I find that I've had, that world tour that I did. I mean, we did Indonesia, France, Denmark. We were in the USA as well, and all the discussions about moving away from labor. And it just blew me away. Well, I'd rather invest in staff than invest in the facility, and if you do you could argue that your staff are more expensive, than when we have to pay here. But end of the day, if you work it out on a per pig basis or a per kilogram basis, and what the return on investment on it, it's almost nothing. So it doesn't make sense to me, this whole drive to get away from labor. I understand if the labor is not available, but it is, if you're able to afford it and pay for it. And the cost per kilogram is negligible when you sit down and do the maths.
I was about to ask if you thought that automation was sort of taking the responsibility away from managers and laborers and things like that, and you've definitely answered that question. So I think
sorry to talk over you a little bit there, but I find it really sad to be honest. And there's a lot of people in the world today that don't have jobs, that don't have income streams, that, and I understand there are parts of the world where you can't find labor or it's too expensive. And the whole world is so unbalanced with this mega drive, to move away from labor. But there's people here living off of less than $10 a month that would literally do anything in the world to be able to go and work, for $500, $600 a month. And I don't know why countries are not collaborating at that level where you could take, sort of labor over on a 3-month period. And obviously just need to be careful people don't disappear into the woodworks, is what usually happens in those type of scenarios. But I think there could be such a great opportunity for countries to cross collaborate, where there's just this absolute need for households and low earning households to get some income in. And we're missing this. Instead, people are investing billions and billions of dollars. I mean, we're in Denmark and they've got this massive sort of cropping machine that looks like a disco. It shoots lasers up to shoot weeds out of the ground. I'm like, there's so many people here that are like not ever going to get an opportunity and not ever feed their kids because we're investing millions of dollars in a laser machine that walks up and down a crop shooting weeds. I mean, come on, guys.
That sounds crazy. I can't imagine. It's like a sci-fi movie.
No, it is.
Yeah, that's really interesting. To revert back to your previous podcast, I was not on that one about the pigs, but listening to it, Casey can obviously add to it. I want to know what has changed. I heard that you did a creep feed study. You changed your herd status or the makeup of your herd. How has it changed? What, if you could look back and just reflect on that since your last podcast?
So we're still running with Topics Norseman genetics, which incredibly proud of being able to do that. We love the animal. It's the TN70, which is pretty much taken over this side of the world. She's a great sow. She definitely gives the piglets. There was a massive improvement from the TN60 down to the TN70 regarding feed conversion efficiencies. So just all around enjoying working with her. The production levels are looking really good. We've got new farms down as well, so we've managed to increase. We've had a little fun with some trials with the creep versus no creep trial. So I've got some cool data on that if you guys wanted to see the comparisons. It was definitely worth doing the trial. So we did 24 batches, week-on-week batches in total. So 12 creep and 12 no creep. And it was one on, one off, so that we could, make sure we didn't, we stayed with any sort of climatic changes. So that became a really interesting topic, which I think, Casey, you might find interesting as well, jumping in on that. So here's some trial results. Can you guys see these?
Yep.
So very interesting was the total mortality pre and post weaning. So you can see the creep had a higher mortality than the no creep, and then the total litter mass, the no creep piglets were a bit heavier. But you got to keep an eye on the points here. There's not a massive difference. There's 3% versus 10.6% mortality. On the total litter mass, creep came in, just under 89.4 kilos, whereas the no creep came in at 89.7. So very, very close. Where it starts flipping over, it was like watching a horse race, to be honest. Like every week, batch on batch, you're like, who's done better? On the 70-day gain, though, this is where the animals fed creep started to show a bit of muscle, and then came out, at a 70-day weight slightly heavier than the no creep, 26 versus 26.1. And then we looked at the sow empty body weight loss. So obviously on the no creep, the sows lost more body weight, 9.8% body condition loss, versus the creep on a 9.3. And then the creep also performing with a better farrowing rate than the no creep animals, 92.5 versus 91. And then on the no creep, there were definitely more standovers post weaning than with the creep. We wanted to see if how the sows performed like that, because obviously with our creep, you're putting more pressure on the animals. And then the CDM results the no creep coming in about a kilo behind the creep animals. And then as well with the feed conversion efficiency, no creep performing not as well as the creep. So, yeah, that was just some interesting information that I thought you guys might.
How many replicas, how many trials did you say you did? 12? What was it?
24. So 12 on, 12 off. 1 on, 1 off,
Okay.
but 24 in total. So
very interesting result.
So, Philip, did I hear
data,
that?
yeah.
The creep worked or the creep did not work?
So what you can get out of this is definitely in the farrowing house, the piglets perform better without creep. There was a lot less treatments, a lot less scouring. The piglets are a lot heavier. But then it's after that where you see the real value of creep coming through. So I feel when we did these trials initially, I was very excited about the no creep. And as we've gone along with time, you realize creep has a value, but you need to be feeding the right creep in your farrowing house, would be my comment on that. I think if you're feeding soya-based diets, your piglet's guts are not able to handle it. That's kind of where I'm leaning to now. Like, why is there such a negative effect of creep on the piglets under the sow? And yeah, so it's a really interesting trial. I do think it needs a lot more work going into, a lot more to understand, because you want a good result too. How much better would the creep trials have done as well post weaning if it were the right creep under the sow as well?
And so in 70 days, though, the pigs who had creep feed weighed more.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they're about 1 kilogram heavier at the end with a very slightly better FCE. The thing is, you got to work out the cost of that creep under the sow versus the cost of that 1 kilo CDM, because it's easier, because you don't have to handle it, because it's you save having the financial outlay of the creep, you save having the labor of having to put the creep down. So there's a lot of savings you do. So we just got to see what the cost benefit analysis is, which I actually haven't done yet. We haven't finished the trial yet. We've still got about 5 or 6 batches to come through on the CDM side, in which case we're going to do a full cost benefit analysis on it as well.
Well, I think it also goes into the point, it's not as negative as I thought it was going to be. It just shows that we can't stop the trials at the end of the farrowing house. I mean, we need to look at it all the way through.
You got to, it's ridiculous. If you did a no creep and creep trial in the farrowing house, you're not going to continue with creep. I can guarantee that. But it would be a huge mistake to be stopping your trial there, because the sows are losing a lot more body condition. So are you measuring what the sows are doing? The farrowing rates are better on the creep diets. So you got to, it branches into 2 sections after the farrowing house. Is what's happening to the sow, and then what's happening to the piglet in weaner, and then ultimately as it comes out of grower, which is what we tracked through.
And that cost, really, when you look at the value of the reproduction rate improvements that you have, you're offsetting some of that cost of the next litter, and not necessarily that litter going to slaughter that she fed the creep feed to. Yeah.
So I think it was a hell of an interesting trial. I've been doing pigs for a long time. When we were suggested to take creep out, I was like, no way, you're nuts. And it got really interesting taking it out. So yeah, I definitely think it's good for people just to stay open-minded, good for people to do their own trials. Every farm's different as well. Do the trials, but definitely run them all the way through.
And it's such an easy trial to run too. People can do it on their own farms. Like you said, you had 12 on, 12 off. It's really simple. And you just got to take every factor into account, including management. I mean, what do you think the influence of management was on your creep feed? Keeping those troughs clean. Do you think that maybe increased your mortality or caused any issues? I have seen a few farms where the little creep feeders were super dirty. The piglets were standing inside of the creep feeders. How much of that influence do you think was?
But that's exactly it. Like, how much work do you want to do? So the guys on the farm who were doing this trial, it's going to be very difficult to tell them to continue feeding creep, especially people who manage farrowing houses independently as well. Don't want to go back to creep, because it's more work to keep a creep dish clean, to keep feed going into it. So exactly what you say. So yeah, it's a hell of a lot easier, and it's a big saving as well to not have to go the creep. But yeah, people just need to be careful. I think there's a slight benefit to feeding the creep, but how much bigger is that benefit, Casey? And this is where you guys would come in as nutritionists. What does the right creep look like? And that would be really interesting to find out and discuss as well.
Well, I think you made a good point, because before the podcast, as I was getting intel and talking to you, thought it was going to be a little more dramatic, but it's actually probably what I anticipated seeing based on our conversation. And that's why I'm always like, you can't stop it at weaning. You have to see at least through the nursery period what's going to happen, because it tells you a different story. It told me that we've most likely adapted the immune system to maybe where they could have been more efficient. So, you said it was a really heavy soy creep feed. Well, that was negative on a young pig because it just doesn't have the endogenous enzymes to digest soybean meal. It really needs that milk proteins, very highly digestible proteins in the creep feed. When then you add that in, you're adding another layer of cost, because we're looking at, a 30 to 40% increase if we alter that protein carbohydrate structure in the creep feed. But, I know healthy, vibrant pigs, at least the farrowing houses I manage, would eat the sows feed. And there's been some research to even suggest, if you just get them to start eating, there's that long-term benefit. But everybody in the U.S. who's very anti-creep would say, they'd look at your wean data and say, yeah, the labor was just too much. This is not good. I look at this, the reproductive sow, the subsequent farrowing. That's an amazing piece of data there. That's highly valuable. I would think without her losing so much body weight, that translates also into longevity.
I was just about to say longevity. Yeah. The value of longevity. Yeah.
But I think there's some other things you could probably do in the creep feed if we didn't change for higher, highly digestible or more expensive protein sources. There's some feed additive strategies that we can really do to set those pigs up right. And I keep going back to the example that Dr. Maxwell finally got to run the trial. And then he got a USDA grant on top of that, is by putting little dirt pans in the farrowing crates, so our little sandboxes, as we called it, and offering pigs dirt. Because early in his lab at Arkansas, they looked at indoor versus outdoor pigs, and the outdoor born pigs that were born on dirt, brought them inside, just performed so much better than the indoor pigs. And I think that is getting that immune system, that gut immune system, getting the body seeing foreign materials helps it be more efficient. And you have, in your case, you have a very high health system. You're not running PRRS or anything like that.
No, we don't know what PRRS is. It's never been here in this country before. I think South Africa the same. Chantal, you guys don't have PRRS either there.
We do like mycoplasma and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're terrified of African swine fever. We're endemic here with ASF and foot and mouth disease, so we wouldn't dream of bringing in dirt into the piggery. But what I can tell you, you might like this, is I used to run pigs before, high health herd, and whenever the pigs had scours, it's called a chiduri, a little anthill. These ants make these little mounds. Where's my hands? And we used to go knock the anthill off and go and chuck it in the pig pen with the piglets, and it used to clear up the scours better than any antibiotic ever could. So
Casey, it's made of clay, basically like a clay soil.
Yeah, it's a clay-based anthill. Yeah.
Because they are feed additives that are clay-based. Oh.
Exactly. And I mean, there's some work with just a simple clay of controlling, E. coli and salmonella and the toxins from those diseases. So it doesn't shock me that it did clear up scours.
Yeah.
Fascinating, adaptable farming.
Yeah, don't do it though.
Well, we'll have to follow up maybe with just like a short interview to say what was the economics, because I'm sure our audience, after hearing this, they're going to want to know what the full ramifications were of the trial. But I'd also want to probably look at your economic models and make sure we're evaluating that post reproductive performance properly in your data set, not just on the slaughter weights and slaughter value.
Yeah. So like I said, what we're tracking at the moment was the number of animals standing over at service, which obviously push your wean service interval up, and then we're tracking just the farrowing rates as well. We could follow those batches through and see what the subsequent born alive or total borns could be as well, which means we're going to have a long wait for those batches to come through, but it's probably worth the wait. There's so much, 24 batches, and we have all of this information available. Could mean let's wait a couple of months and let's get the full picture. What did the sows branch off and do? What did the growers all end up doing? And what are the economics on the two of those?
It'd be really interesting to look at intestinal morphology as well. I know that we had slightly improved feed efficiency in those growers towards the end there, and there was similar studies done in dairy cows on the calves, whether to supplement those calves just milk or milk and give them free hay, and they did more poorly supplemented on hay in the beginning, but later on in life in the feedlot they did way better, and that's obviously to do with intestinal morphology. So I'm sure those pigs, although they're not ruminants, undergo something similar. So I find that really fascinating, and the effect is so large. Really cool.
For sure.
Now, what's a kilogram of pork worth today for you guys?
It's about, just the last price, about $2.46 to the farmer. But out of the door about $3.20. But we're not an environment where you can really compare with, because of our sort of we have to import everything. We don't produce much locally. We're not able to export anything. Maize is fairly political, so I think comparatively it's always very difficult. Like, you've got to view Zim in the light of Zim on its own. It doesn't compete with anyone outside of here. And no one outside of here can compete with us internally either. It's like this little island, the way it's managed. So yeah, you have to manage it economically and viably within this country based on our challenges, etc. But for sure, it's not comparative. I mean, our pork prices, as soon as you tell South Africans what we get for our pork, they're like, that's amazing. We get such a good price for our pork, but they don't know the cost of getting there. We're $100 a ton more on raw materials if we're lucky. So yeah, it's not comparative.
Yeah, that being said, like, the economics is not comparative, but I think the research is comparative.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, what we find out as far as production goes and our production systems and management, all of that stuff, where we are different is we're high labor setups. I mean, we've got 600 employees, which often blow people away. But at the end of the day, I agree with it, and I believe it's the right model to have in countries like this. Really uplift communities and get incomes going and households earning. And then people could argue, whether those employees are being paid a fair value. Again, comparatively it is, because the alternative is sort of famine. I don't know if this is part of the recording that we're going to do, or we have an entirely different discussion on it, but it does open large-scale debate when we do talk about it.
Well, I mean, when you talk about sustainability, community health, and economics, corporations don't like to talk about. They like to talk about their CO2 credits.
It's mad. And that's so after I did my Nuffield Global Focus program, I came back and I actually wrote down somewhere, I said, has the freaking world gone mad? Like, we're talking about carbon credits, and we're talking about putting more and more pressure on farmers and more stress. I mean, if you look at France, for example, I think I mentioned this in one of the podcasts before, they used to be 100% self-sufficient on their beef. France only produces 60% of the beef requirement that it has now, because of government policies putting more and more pressure on farmers to reduce carbon footprints. But their beef consumption has gone up over 100%. So at the same time, the farmers are taking a hiding. The mental health crisis in agriculture is very dominant in France. Suicide rates are really high because of those pressures. But they're importing and using more and more beef from countries that are less responsible. I mean, you guys, no one's thinking about this stuff.
Well, I think that's another topic for another day, but I think it's something you have to consider when we're looking at, the meat you're producing staying local. You're putting back in the local community, right, to keep people fed and, employed. And I think that's really important. And I'm going to switch gears, though, to say there's another interesting trial that you ran. I think the entire world needs to hear about. You have some data for that on the sow weight, or are we just going to talk through that?
Yeah, we can. So we found it very interesting about, we often just track what a sow weighs when she's weaned, and we weigh all our sows are weaning. We do realize there's really good value in gestation gain in regards to her next born life. But what we've never done before is what did she weigh at weaning? And then what did she weigh after insemination 5 or 6 days later? And it blew me away to realize that the sows actually lose a hell of a lot of weight in the service line. And it kind of challenged me a bit because you think, okay, well, we're weaning the sow. We're going from a negative energy balance into a positive energy balance. That's why she comes on heat really quickly. That's why she ovulates. And to realize that these animals are losing some animals up to 34 kilograms in just 4 or 5 days was quite a scary realization. So I'll share my screen again now, just to show you the data that I've got on it. Okay, you guys can see this. So here's sort of the graph, body condition loss. I mean, you can see how many animals, and this is 197 animals, how many animals are losing weight in the service line just in the 4 or 5 days. 17% of these animals lost more than 12 kilograms. 22% gained 1 or more kilograms, but 78% of these animals didn't gain or they lost. So, I mean, you're looking from here, 78% of these animals where you expect them to wean, to go straight onto flush diet, high levels of flush, with sugar and all of the nice things we know. But they didn't. They're losing weight. But you could say on average we lost 6 kilos per animal in the service line just in 4 or 5 days.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's stress? Do you think?
So, the first comment that was made when I said that, and Casey hit the nail on the head as well when we spoke about this, and she did hit the nail on the head, was the loss of the udder. The weight of the udder is what you're losing as well. So again, I think a lot of research needs to go into this as well, because are we feeding the right flush diets? Because you're not in a positive energy balance if the weight is absolutely falling off of her through to the loss of her udder, because that weight is gone. Or how do you measure the success of that? Is your next born live good? Is your next, the fewer standovers you've got and a good farrowing rate a good thing? Or are we missing something? And have we got potentially some really low-hanging fruit here where we could increase born lives by even another piglet or two by making sure that positive energy balance is positive? Why are 30% of the animals gaining weight? And what's happening to the ones that are gaining weight in their next litter? So I think we need to follow that question all the way through as well.
And I think it goes to how we give nutrition, right? Because a lot of that, we want to do it through dry feed, and we put sugar or different things in there, or high fat to get the energy up because they're not eating, they don't feel well. But I think there's also opportunity in my mind. We look at the young pig as a liquid diet. Do we need to look at water sources or, more of a liquid-based diet, because to keep them hydrated and drinking more, because they're not lactating, which means they may not be drinking more as well. And, water is our most important nutrient.
Yeah, it's a good point as well, because, I mean, your post-weaning, piglet goes into weaner. The first week is always a disaster, and that's really linked to dehydration. Those things struggle in the first week, and the better you do in the first sort of 70 days post weaning is all back to that first week. How hydrated can I keep my piglets in the first week? So it's a very interesting comment. And you translate that back to the sow. And yeah, what is a positive energy balance and what does it look like in that phase?
As I would say, 12 kilograms is not a full bladder or a poop. So.
Yeah, and it's an udder, you know, so research shows I think the udder is between 9 and 12 kilograms. So you probably expect to lose 9 to 12 kilograms, but then you also expect to gain at least a kilogram a day. So, you know, at best, so your best performing animals, you probably, you know, just talking out loud here, you probably expect to lose 5 or 6 kilos. And then it's to manage that variation. Okay, so why have you got some that are losing more than 6 kilos? And why have you got some that are gaining so much? Maybe they didn't perform so well or had lower, you know, sort of wean weights. So I think it's definitely an interesting phase to have weighed. I never expected to have lost that much weight in those.
Yeah, I'm really surprised by it, and I really look forward to, you know, looking deeper into it. I think it's something that's overlooked. I've never heard of it. So I'm fascinated now.
Well, what I'm curious about, did you record those weights and you can follow those sows through all the way to their next lactation?
Yeah, I've actually got the individual tags. I've got their weights every week as a gilt. We're data nuts here. So I've tracked them every single week. I've weighed those as a gilt. I've got a whole lot of farrowing information on them, and we weigh them at 5 different places in gestation as well. So there's a batch of, call it plus or minus 200. So yeah, we can really see how these girls do in their next litters.
Sounds like a good modeling exercise for Chantel to look at, because I'm curious what happens to those outlier populations.
Philip, I think you hit the nail on the head there, that you're data nuts. Your management, I think, is excellent on your farm. I think the numbers show that. And the fact that you use data in a productive way, you don't just leave data in a drawer, I always say. So I think that's, now I understand why your farm does so well. It's because you're actually you're being proactive.
To prove people wrong for the wrong reasons. Like, I got a point.
But I would definitely love to do a simulation model. This would be fascinating.
I was going to say, if Chantel doesn't have something, I do. I mean, what I think, since we met 4 years ago, since doing the Real P3 as a swine manager out there in production, what are some easy hanging fruit that anybody around the world in swine production could use today to make a positive difference in their production system?
That's quite a loaded question because it depends on where. So, and what you want to improve. Do you want to improve cost? Do you want a better efficiency? Do you want, you know, better production? Do you want more piglets, for example? So it's a great question, but it's a broad one to shoot at. Casey, we've done a podcast on it. I mentioned it earlier, but the boar. If you want to get your production up, I had another farm now that I was on their service line. I wasn't happy with the boars. They weren't frothing enough. I shared that video with that boar, how much he was foaming. It looked like snow all over the place by the time he was done. I went to the second farm with that video. We had a chat about his boars. He's changed all his boars. His boar line's gone up by 1.5 piglets per sow. It's a jump, you know, and I know, you know, it takes a while to get there. It took a while to get all the boars to that sort of level and change them out and stuff like that. And I asked him, you look at his born life graph and it just ladders up like that. And I said, what happened there? And he said, oh, well, that's when we sorted the boars out. You know, so I would say to people, once again, check a boar's not a boar. Your teaser boar needs to tick a lot of boxes, and I don't think people are paying attention to that. I've seen teaser boars standing in service lines, and I've seen teaser boars just, you know, like kind of neglected, and they come through and they're sort of a token. But yeah, I think there's some really low-hanging fruit on that. And then, yeah, I would also say gilt rearing, it's an age and weight service target, not one or not the other. So you got to aim, you know, of between 155 and 172 kilograms at your service target weight, and it has to be between 31 and 33 weeks of age. It's not just a weight-driven thing. its age and weight. So I would say really pay attention to that if you want to look at gilt production and more. It just goes, the list goes on, Casey. It really goes on.
I think that the biggest takeaway I got from you is collect data, which we can do, but you're actually utilizing the data to make decisions. And I think there's a gap there of collecting the right data, collecting enough data, and then utilizing that to make business decisions.
Collecting data accurately too. It's another big one.
Yeah, and that's questionable as well, and who writes that data? We haven't not had those issues before where people, who get incentivized on certain production results, so the data usually comes across wrong and you've got to be able to interrogate it. Those challenges do happen when you collect data, but absolutely. And it's really nice for our team to come through, our nutritionists, our consulting vets and all of that, to be able to access that data and also help us make informed decisions. So when you do collect data, you don't always read it, you don't always analyze it. It becomes, you can't see the wood from the trees. And it is really helpful when you target or specifically look for something. And then even more so valuable when the team outside is able to analyze that data. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know if people collect as much data as we do. I feel we've got the biggest and most in-depth data sets that there are, apart from research farms. But we're able to collect it and we're able to analyze it. And yeah, absolutely.
That's excellent. Well, Casey, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm turning it over to the host. I've done too much. This is my problem. I'm supposed to be talking.
Well, you're getting passionate about it, so I'll let you go at it. It's always interesting to bounce ideas off of each other. But I want to thank you, Philip, for returning. I think this was a really valuable podcast. I hope people listen to it and share it. I think everybody can learn something from it. I definitely learned something from it. So I really look forward to hearing back from you about the creek feed economics, and then obviously the sows, wean weights and all those things. So we can have another follow-up. But I've really enjoyed speaking to you. It's really nice to hear a Southern African accent. So yeah, really great. And I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
No, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. We'll chat soon, I'm sure.